Hello and welcome to the live debates hosted by BFM and LA1 TV. This is the first of three debates tonight, and I'm your host, Tom Pearson, and we will be hosting the debate for the VP Union Development role. I am joined by Matty, Luke and Martin. And first off, would you guys like to introduce yourselves? Give it about a minute or two to introduce both yourselves and some various points of your manifesto. We'll start with the person directly to my left. Martin, please take it away.
Hi, I'm Martin, and I'm in my last year studying economics and politics, and I'm going to be a vice president of Union Development. So my key manifesto points: I want to continue engaging with our democratic structures, to ensure our union is truly democratic. I think the ideas system we have in place is fantastic, but I don't think a lot of people are aware enough of it. Similarly, working with JCRs, that's the main priority of mine. Improving on the training and development and ensuring that it's supported throughout the entire year, because this student's just like me. Continue to fight for the survival of Sugar House, so hopefully we can in the future fully utilise its space as a student venue rather than just a nightclub.
Hi, I'm Matty. I'm a third year English language and linguistics student, running for VPUD, obviously. I'm running because I think I've got the experience to do the role really well. So I'm currently a society president. I'm a former VP socials for JCR for File. Last year I ran File Cello Extra, which I loved. Hope everyone who went did as well. And I currently work at Sugar House, so I know some things from within the commercial services as well. For manifesto points, I really want to work with colleges and increase the budget for extra, because as someone who's organised one, and I know you're obviously aware as well, you can do so much more with more money, and that is the main it's the main thing that holds you back when you do extra is a budget. You can't get set an act, or you can't get the decorations you really want because the money, it just helps the student experience and everything. In terms of governance, I want to work closely with democracy officers and JCRs to increase voter turnout and set up an action plan really to get more candidates, so we don't have walkovers and uncontested positions. And then for commercial services, I want to make some more innovative and diverse events at Sugar, because I think more can be done there, and I think with my experience I'm the right person to be able to do it as well.
And finally, Luke.
Hi, I'm Luke Smith, and I'm again running to VP UB. So I'm a third year economics student, and during my time at Lancaster, I've been on the intra-week committee for Grisdale, and also was vice president for socials and events as well at Grisdale. So some of my main points, as the two candidates have mentioned, are interacting with the JCRs for all the colleges across campus. We've all been on the JCR. We know that support from LUSU, when you need it, is really vital to be able to put on the best events that you can. And so there needs to be a point of contact. I want to keep doing the brilliant work that the other UBs have in terms of being a point of call for the JCR for when they need it. As well as that, being kind of a lead on the extras and on intro week as UB is a big part of what I want to take my energy and put it into. Not only because extra obviously is a massive thing, it takes a lot of energy from the committees across campus, so they need as much of that support as possible. Looking at funding structure, again like Matty said, and also intro week is really important, because if students come in intro week and they really engage with the students' union and with their JCR in that first week, they're more likely then to be engaged with it throughout their time, which again falls into helping with voter turnout for the JCR elections or for the student union elections. And then the other part is commercial services, so that's being a non-executive director on the Sugar House, living, and the other commercial services that the union provides. In terms of Sugar House, it is still under threat from developments going on in and around the Lancaster area and directly around the Sugar House, which is constantly threatening it. The Sugar House needs someone there to fight their corner against not only some of the developers there, but also fighting the corner with the council as well, giving it a reason to keep going. Events, we can do so much more with the Sugar House. I mean, so much being done already. The events and the range of them are brilliant, but there's always always more you can do. Looking at data and attendance numbers from events that have happened, that's a way to build up new events, and also getting students' opinion, because at the end of the day, if nobody wants to go to these events, then they're not going to be popular, and Sugar House is going to face even more threat. So you need to really target nights to as many people as possible, because the Sugar House is an integral part of a lot of students' time here at Lancaster. And finally, democracy and governance. None of this is possible without people, nominating themselves for positions in JCR and the Students' Union. Also going out and voting. JCR election numbers aren't massively high. I mean, it's below 50% across the board. And so we really need to get more people involved in nominating themselves for the JCR positions, and also voting, because it makes people more invested in their time at university if they feel like they've got a direct role to play in how their experience is shaped, but also how other people's experience is shaped. So I really want to put my energies into these massive things during my time.
Brilliant, thank you guys for introducing yourselves. Obviously now you've got a bit of that out of the way, and our viewers and listeners can they know a bit about what your manifestos are about. We'll get into the meat of the debate. So we'll start off. Could you guys please explain to us what previous positions you've held at the university and in the Students' Union, and how would you expand on your experience that you've had for the broader FTO role? We'll start with Matty, please.
So as I mentioned in my introduction, I've been on a society exec since my first year, which I'm now president of. So I held a social secretary role there for 2 years, and now president. In second year I joined the JCR for file as a social sec. Then as our VP had to leave, I stepped up and took the role of VP Socials and Events for Fire College last year. And then now working at Sugar House and within the management school as well, helping with essay writing for international students mainly. So it's all focused around students and like the student experience here at Lancaster. So I think they'll all help with UD as a whole.
What experience in particular do you think would help you in the FTO role?
So I think vice president of socials is like the main one that drives into it, because a lot of the work as UD is around extra and events as obviously one part of the role, and that extra is like the main role as VP socials, is to plan and execute that alongside the committee that you run. As a society president, I'm currently in the middle of organising elections for the next year, so that helps to feed into the democracy side as well, but that's also just a personal interest in that too. And then Sugar obviously helps with commercial services.
Brilliant, thank you. Martin?
I've also previously run as vice president for Parnell. It was my second year actually. I agree massively. The social side is quite a large part of the uni experience as well. And obviously the role involves working, with JCRs. And I think just being on a JCR, you sort of understand how stressful it can be at times, and it can be overwhelming sometimes too, because you're expected to do so much, but sometimes it's not you're not provided with all the information you could possibly be provided with. So I think maybe introducing stuff like a compulsory handover package, having one-on-one sessions with outgoing JC officers and potential newcomers, so they can fully get a taste of what they're actually going to be experiencing whilst they're doing it. So VP was definitely.
Brilliant. And finally, Luke?
Like the other two, I've been VP for Socials for Grisdale. I've also been social sec for a society on campus, the Baking Society, shameless plug. Great. And before that, I was on the intro week committee, and for the time I was co-opted in as social sec before I ran for VP. Just with the things you take from being, let's say, for example, VP, you're introduced into some of the things that you'd work as UD, so it's extra and then socials, helping out with what was Big Night Out, and I imagine now be looked at and turned into something different. And so that a lot of that just gives you that first insight into this is what an extra is, this is what the JCRs will need to do for it, and this is the kind of support they need. So taking that skill into being UD is a big help. Just as well as that, all these roles you do need to talk to quite a few people, different groups of people with different interests. So whether you're social sec for a society or VP, or even intra-week, you're constantly liaising with different people, trying to get a compromise for each individual group, because there are a lot of stakeholders in what goes on around the university and with the Students' Union, and everybody needs to agree to something for it to actually happen and happen successfully. So being able to compromise and negotiate with different groups is something that I can definitely bring to the role.
And obviously now you've all just stated you've all held very similar positions in the different JCRs. What mistakes or missed opportunities have you had in those roles, and how have you learned from it, and how can this apply to the role of VPUD? We'll start with Luke.
There were definitely a fair few mistakes I made during the course of everything I did, which only helps to, teach me how to do things correctly. So just a couple of them off the bat. At Grisdale we do a really big event called Secret Social, and so we take, normally it's around 40, 50 students ideally away for the weekend to a different city, and in terms of working with the JCR and putting on events, it's quite a big, large-scale planning fiasco, transporting 40 to 50 people across the country normally, and finding accommodation for that many people at a reasonable price. So a mistake I definitely made for that was perhaps not delegating enough, taking too much on, and then eventually having to do things last minute. So there really needs to be a lot of delegation going on where possible, and also just time management. That's a massive thing that I learned doing everything I did. It's just having things started in time, and working out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And aside from that, it's just you really need to be able to read people and what they want to do. If you and your friends don't want to attend an event, for example, or you don't think something sounds interesting, chances are not a lot of other people do. And so you really need to gauge what other people think and put that into everything you do.
Brilliant. Martin, can we come to you next, please?
Yeah, of course. Probably one of my biggest mistakes is probably not making events as inclusive as it could be. It's hard to always lose track of socials are a great idea, people enjoy them, but not everyone wants to go out and get pissed. So it's just something a bit more tailored to everyone. And also delegating in time, yeah, definitely. But I think generally as a JCR, maybe transparency was a big issue, because you have the JCR and you have the college, but sometimes that interaction is lacking. And so we definitely need to be more transparent in the future, I think, and sort of more open.
And how would you bring that into your role if you were to be elected?
So definitely better line of communication. An idea maybe is possibly so we have our JCR meetings every week, posting minutes, encouraging debates on Facebook, on social media. It's such a massive, powerful way. I don't think we're taking enough advantage of it.
Brilliant. And final?
Similar to what both have mentioned so far, delegation massively, especially during the extra process, because we had a committee of 10 people, which I used a lot with the initial ideas and coming up with ideas for decorations and acts and stuff. But then when it came towards extra, getting closer, and everything comes up with risk assessments and getting people in on the day, and just a lot of stuff builds up, and I tried to take a lot of it on without too much help from other people, and I think that is just such a massive lesson to learn. Use the people around you who are there to help, and yeah.
Thank you. When it comes to political action, should the Students' Union be giving information to students and allowing them to decide for themselves whether they want to involve themselves, or should the Students' Union actively encourage to protest or not protest over particular issues? Is there a balance that can be struck there, and if so, how does that balance get stricken? We'll start with Matty, please.
I think as FTO and the Student Union representative, we are representing all students, so we need to get their opinion on any matter. So for political action especially, you need to know the mood that the student population are in before you know whether to make or take action. So I think there is a balance to be struck if there isn't an overwhelming support for action to be taken. I think definitely it could be driven from the Students' Union itself.
And Luke, sorry.
No,
Just caught up for a second.
Yeah, no. I think it's definitely important to educate people, regardless of what the issue is. People need the information to have an informed opinion about something, and the students' union, is there to represent students' opinions and their needs and wants. And if students don't have the required information, they can't, form, full opinions. So educating them on matters they can then go and get involved in is really important. Just giving them the tools to do that. And whether the students' union should, actively take part in political debates. Like Matty said, the students' union represents the students across campus, and so without a consensus, there is no mandate for the students' union going off and doing something. I wouldn't expect the students' union to support, a particular political party of their own accord if they hadn't first consulted the students and said, we do support. But more than that, if there are massive events going on, for example, Brexit, or even just recently the teacher strike, I think for those types of things to gauge student opinion it's quite difficult. Like reaching out to the entire student base, and you're always going to have people say, oh, you haven't reached enough people. You're not representing me. You're not representing people like me, my friends, my group. And for things like that, all you can do is try and institute some kind of democratic process by which you can get as many people to voice their opinions to the students union, for them to go say, okay, well, this is a big group, this is the big group's opinion, we're going to push that because this is what's happened. So even like running a referendum, or just a referendum on opinions, just if there's a massive thing, put it out to the student base, what do you guys think about this, and then from that the students union can then go and say, this is the opinion of the wider student group, this is what we're running with.
Thank you. And finally, Martin?
Yeah, so speaking to our current Lucy officers, I know there's been a lot of criticism about them not being political enough. So I think when it comes to big issues, as you guys have mentioned, I think Lucy does sort of need to get on board. But with issues where it's a bit iffy, if there's not enough representation on both sides of the debate, I think Lucy just needs to let people know, this is going on, people can get involved, but there shouldn't really be, I don't know, there shouldn't be too much encouragement for one side over the other. I think it should be quite balanced.
Now, obviously, you just mentioned a potential referendum, but a continuous problem with the Students' Union is actually getting students to engage with these issues. For example, in the referendum, we might potentially only have a voter turnout of 30 to 40% of the students at the university. How can the Students' Union use feedback or any other ideas to broaden and actually get students to engage? Start with Matthew, please.
I think it's about using different methods and not always like going to Alex Square, which obviously it's going to always be a massive way of doing this because so many people in Alex Square are passing through. So like a physical presence is always like necessary and welcome, but using like new online tools and like surveys and stuff like that can always help to like draw in feedback, and then to use it, you just gotta listen to what the students want, I guess, and like implement like different ways that you can change based on feedback you've been given.
Matthew, please. Not Matthew. Luke, sorry.
Don't worry. We do look quite similar.
For some reason, it's just your name I can't pinpoint.
It's fine. It is a difficult name. My mum gets it wrong all the time. So, like Matt said, there are so many different tools you can use to get the students' opinions, and like you said, a lot of time it is really difficult to reach, most of the students, and try and gather a cohesive opinion. But it could take 5 minutes, 10 minutes set for SurveyMonkey, and you ask 2 questions, and if it's something really important, really simple, like Brexit referendum, for example, just from that you've got a majority student opinion, for example. In terms of the tools exist, and the Students' Union currently do use those tools for a lot of things. But I feel like the way that we're kind of trying to get this message out there and get the feedback in, could always use more work. Putting up posters and Facebook posts sometimes always isn't enough. Tweeting about something isn't always enough. But you need to look at who students interact with. They interact with their JCRs. If we could, almost cascade information down from the Students' Union to JCRs to then give to their students, that's a way of reaching more people. Like I said, like the Students' Union do now, setting up in Alex Square, for example, that's a great way to reach people. You need to get the information out there to as many people as possible using as many different sources, and a lot of that time it does have to be physical. You have to actually go out there and really bug people for that information, and that's something that I feel like more needs to be done in that kind of regards, rather than just focusing on Facebook and Twitter.
Right, thank you, Luke. Martin?
Yeah, so JCR I think are a vital sort of point of communication, to better that line of communication with JCR students, and mostly because a lot of students don't tend to engage with our Students' Union as much as they engage with our JCR, which is sort of quite hard to engage with them. But I think letting people know from day one, Freshers Week, that our Students' Union is here for anything, like support, anything possible. And I think it's just letting them know that we're here, really, because if I was just a normal student, I wasn't part of the JCR, I wasn't engaging with societies, I wouldn't think of any reason why should I go to my Students' Union, what can I do there, what can be said. I think it just needs to be more transparent information, more communication. I think it's good at the moment, but there's always room for improvement.
Thank you very much. Moving on to a big aspect of your role that all of you have mentioned already, the Sugar House. A stereotype of students is that they go out and party all the time, but the fact is that less UK students are going out than ever, mainly due to lack of money. Bearing that in mind, how can we get more people going to the Sugar House on a regular basis? Martin, we'll start back with you, please.
I think if we shift the emphasis from just the nightclub, just from drinking culture, maybe to more of a student-led venue, we can get more people interacting with it. I mean, it's a great off-campus facility. My friend in first year did LU Pole Fitness, and one issue for her was society had to stop for a bit because they couldn't find anywhere in town that would accommodate it, so they tried to pop breed into different bars. But it's such a great space. It's sort of, I think having everything based on campus is sort of like a barrier, restricts people who are living off campus. So having this amazing venue which you can fully utilise would be a great idea.
Luke?
Yeah, so like I said, there's this great space with which to do things in. Even in second year and in first year, there was a laser tag company invited to the Sugar House. And that's brilliant. I went every time they were there, and I had a lot of fun. So it's the first time I'd seen sugar during the harsh light of day. I smelt it. That was interesting. But yeah, there's so much you can do with the Sugar House, and definitely there are fewer students now that tend to go out 3-4 times a week than there were, say 4 years ago. I mean, even when I was a fresher, we would go out 3-4 times a week. But now, after speaking to freshers, they're just not as into that kind of lifestyle and that kind of student experience. There's still that base there, people who want to go out and who want to drink every Friday, every Saturday, every Wednesday, and we can't forget those people in the shifting of possible focus. But creating varied events at the Sugar House, it doesn't necessarily have to be using that space for something during the day. It could just be taking an otherwise normal night out and putting in something completely different there, inviting new different acts, not just DJs but performers and artists and anything that you can think of that you can express in that kind of massive space that we've got. I mean, that'd be brilliant. It doesn't have to involve drinking, and even with the JCR, we're constantly trying to look for ways where we can set up events that don't involve going out. You get absolutely hammered. And it's just about looking at what students want, gathering the data on that, taking opinions and saying, well, a lot of students want this. We have, like I said, a great space. Let's do that now.
Brilliant. Matty?
Yeah, so as someone on the JCR previously, it is very evident that people are going out less and less, and people are less interested in drinking events and bar crawls. So there is that issue, but then also I think it comes down to an issue of cost of living as well, which campaigns this year with like the pastor in Alex Square, I think things like that can be done again to try and lobby like the university into lowering prices, especially for things like rent and like everyday food and stuff on campus. It's very expensive. In terms of regards, I agree with both what they've said, using the space more in the day, but also, varying what's there at night. I've said in my manifesto I really want to diversify the events there, and I think that will get more people out as well as try to tackle some of the issues like cost of living.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to shift over to some more manifesto-based questions. If we've got time at the end, we'll either head over to some questions submitted from students or potentially head back to some of the ones that we've got down here. Now, Martin, we're going to start with you.
Sure.
You write in your manifesto about wanting to make societies as diverse as possible. What practical plans do you have to promote diversity within the societies?
Right, so speaking to Cass previously, he's said how societies play a large role with the JCR. So maybe encouraging societies, so if large societies to run for JCR positions could encourage diversity. Pretty much that.
And Matty, you mentioned using JCRs to promote elections. Is this the most effective way to help promote student democracy? At the end of the day, the JCR students are students as well, and they may find it's difficult to promote elections proactively, especially when they have studies and JCR responsibilities on top of that. So how can we get JCRs to effectively promote elections, or is this the actual best way to do it?
I think using JCRs to speak to their the college base is always going to be a good idea. Like, they're the first level of engagement for most students. I know now as a non-JCR member, I still follow all the college pages that the JCR run, and that's where I get a lot of the news in the colleges and around the uni. I think all JCRs have a democracy officer, obviously, because they need to run elections, and I think it's working with those officers who have signed up to improve the democracy in the college. This my manifesto point was about college elections as well as students' union elections more generally, because as Luke said earlier, college election turnout, the voter turnout's usually very poor. Candidate turnout in file before there's been a lot of uncontested positions. Sometimes we don't have people running, as is the case I think this year with Cartmel, but there's a few positions that didn't get filled. So I think working with those officers to make sure the democracy within the colleges are strong, but then also when you've got a strong JCR, I think then you build on that to speak to their college body of people to then help student union elections as well.
Thank you. And Luke, staying on the topic of student democracy, you mentioned that you want to make student democracy more transparent and provide more campaigns to rally students around. Do you think this will actually help get more people on board, or will it just potentially fail to engage people with those?
So I think currently there are, obviously there's always a campaign, a different one every week, for trying to get students involved in what's going on around the university, kind of the general news and in their colleges. And a lot of people worry that the more kind of campaigns you run to get people involved, the more people are just going to start to look at all as static and they're just going to stop engaging in anything. And while I agree that just bombarding people with information and trying to get them to vote 24/7 and nominate themselves and get involved, it's not going to work. People do get voter fatigue. They get tired of hearing the same thing day in, day out, and they get tired of hearing that they're not going to make a difference and that they should be involved in things like this. So what we really need to do is start finding different ways to get people involved. Instead of just bombarding them with information, you need to really make the point as to why these things matter. Because if students don't think that things particularly relate to them, then they're not going to want to get involved, because it's just another thing that's going on around campus or in the world that doesn't affect them in any way possible. I think if you really speak to people's sense of wanting to be part of something bigger and wanting to actually be able to make a change, then that's how you get people on board. If you tell people that when they run for a JCR position, I mean, there's always things going, run for a JCR position, you nominate yourself for even for FTO. A lot of the time it's just do it. There's no, this is what has been done by these people, this is what you can do, these are the resources you have to actually go out and make a difference. I think if we start telling people, these are all the really cool things you can do. These are the really cool things you have done. Like, this you could be part of that. Then that's more likely to get more people on board.
Thank you. Coming back to Matty, you mentioned you wanted to include more diverse events for the Sugar House in your manifesto. Do you think there's a proven demand for different events that will make them successful, or is there a risk that people could end up avoiding these different events in the Sugar House instead of embracing them and improving the attendance?
I think if we continue what we're doing now, obviously Wednesdays and Fridays are massively popular, and I think they always will be. But if we look at the amount of people who go out on a Saturday, having been there with like 4 people on the dance floor, something can change and needs to change there. And I think Saturdays could be where you start with these like different events to get people in, because if no one's coming in anyway, why not try a radically different thing that focuses and targets a different group of people, and then if they come, it's more people than would have come anyway. I think it's worth taking the risk and trialing it than it would be to just continue on this like status quo.
Do you have any particular ideas as to what events could diversify the Sugar House lineup throughout the week?
I'd personally like to see some more LGBT-driven nights there, especially to do with the acts and people who are coming. As Luke mentioned earlier, I'd like different types of acts, so a lot of the types of people who are getting announced that come in are just different DJs, whereas I'd like to see different live acts like bands and performers. I think that would be a really good difference in Sugar.
Thank you. Martin, you touched on this as well in your manifesto.
Yeah.
You said you wanted to keep the Sugar House going by maximising it as a student-led venue and not just a nightclub. Do you have any practical plans that you could put into place, or any ideas that you would have to achieve this goal?
So, for example, when hustling takes place for all the societies, like the hockey societies, for example, the hustling takes place in Dalton Rooms or whichever sort of venue that's willing to host them. Why can't they do it at the Union Club, Sugar House? Such a great space, and it's sort of, I think Sugar should accommodate for all these different needs rather than just being a nightclub. So, yeah.
Thank you. Luke, you've mentioned in your manifesto, on a final question on manifestos, that you want to work with JCRs to put on more varied events to appeal to a wider range of people. What ideas do you have for these varied events?
So when I was on the JCR, the number one thing was constantly not only making events that were already established as popular as possible, but we spent a lot of time, not even just socials, just across the JCR, just trying to find different events that would get as many people as possible into engaging with their JCR and the events that we put on. And I think students now, obviously, because there's less of a focus on going out and drinking, we do need to start providing the tools and even just a resource for JCRs to come in, say this is what we want to do, and then have resources available for them to then do that. So when I was in JCR, we tried, and not once did we think to go to Lucy, to the Students' Union, Lucy at the time, for help. And not because we didn't think that they could help us, but just because that idea had never sprung to our minds. We were the JCR, we were a self-contained orb. But I really want to push the idea that the JCRs are always welcome to come to the Students' Union office to speak to me, the other FTOs, should I get in, whoever is in, and that we're going to be there for them, to bounce ideas off, to throw spaghetti at the walls, to see what sticks. And with the JCR, it's less do or die. You can come up with just events every week, and a lot of them are going to fail. And not every event that you do is going to be massively popular, as you guys probably know. There are going to be massive flops. There are going to be speed dating events where 3 people show up. So you really need to start encouraging as well, just a kind of experimentation with events. Events that don't involve drinking, events that involve bringing societies on. one of my someone that was in my JCL, Liz, she was VP for welfare, and she got in a yoga instructor. But there's so much you can do, and it doesn't have to be brand, and it doesn't have to be innovative. It just has to be different enough that it appeals to a different section of your college. Maybe a section that doesn't drink, or international students. Just a different section that you wouldn't have otherwise reached with just your week in, week out quizzes, going out drinking events, free events.
Now, carrying on with the theme of Night Life, this is now a question that's open to all of you. A majority of the college bars which are on campus are underperforming financially. What more can the Student Union do to help college bars be more successful? We'll start with Martin.
I'd probably say put on more events involving the college bars. It's a big night out, and maybe that should be more recurring. We have a big night on, which is quite big, but the problem with that is people still stick to the bars that they prefer. So there's an emphasis, for example, in Cartmel, during Freshers Week, we put on this amazing night, barely anyone came. People like sticking to what they like, so maybe more of an emphasis from the Student Union to expand the horizons, participating in other colleges.
And Luke?
So I was really close with my college bar manager, Al, and just a shameless plug, we were one of the only college bars that were overperforming on our numbers. But she constantly hounded me, Like, every time she saw me a lot, because I used to drink in Grice Bar a lot, day after day. Every time she saw me, she would go, so when's the next event in my bar? What are you doing? Where are the people? And the college bars are a really good space. I mean, every college has a bar, and most of these bars are quite sizable. You can fit a fair few people in there. And it's just about emphasising the fact that those spaces are available to the JCRs, and that the bar managers want to help and they want to work with the JCRs, because at the end of the day, if the bar managers are helping JCRs and they come together and they get more people into the bars, that helps both the JCR, because they've got an event that appeals to students, which at the end of the day is what the JCRs are there for, and the bar makes money. And while it's not the specific aim of JCRs to make college bars money, if both parties are happy and they're helping each other, then that really does serve to make a better atmosphere for just the wider college base in general.
Finally, Matty?
Yeah, I agree with what was said from both of them. What I can expand on is, while JCRs can also use the bars, I think it's important to also educate and facilitate good relations between the college bars and also societies that can use the bars as spaces for their events as well. Because colleges can use it for a quiz, but then so can belly dancing. So I think just focusing more on events that can be on the college bars instead of always somewhere in town or somewhere in a seminar room. Get them in the college bars, get them making money. When the bars are happy, the JCRs are going to have more support, and it's just going to be a better relationship, as you said.
Thank you. And a big question that I don't think we've properly touched on yet. How should the Student Union engage with the NUS? And what positive services do we get from the NUS? Can we come back to you, Matthew, please?
Yeah, so I think the NUS, for a lot of people, has always just been the discount card, and that is, for a lot of students, that is all the NUS gives us. But I think the Student Union has to engage with the NUS, because the NUS is the collaboration and collection of all the student unions, or not all of them, but a lot of student unions within the country. So I think it's important to be a voice within the NUS, and a strong voice to try and lead it in a direction that we want to see it to go in. And what's the second half of the question, sorry?
How should the Student Union engage, and what positive effects do we get from the NUS?
I just think actively engage, and positive effects, I guess it's just the being in a collection has positive effects in itself.
Martin, can you touch on this, please?
Yeah, so with engagement, I think, as Matthew mentioned, a lot of people think it's the student discount card. Maybe our union needs to sort of let more students know what they actually represent, what it does, why it's so important. Yes, it needs to get this information across in a better way.
So how should the Student Union engage, and what positive services do we get from the NUS?
So yeah, being part of the place, as Matthew mentioned, is sort of, you're all in the same boat, trying to get aiming for the same thing, sort of student representation, democracy. But yeah, going back to my last point, I think engagement would be better if there was more transparency between what the NUS actually does for students, because at the moment, like I said, for a lot of people, it's just it's also just a student discount.
And finally, Luke.
Yeah, the NUS, it helps out the students' union with a few things. It provides services. It gives funding for certain campaigns and certain things that the FTOs and wider students' union want to do. And also it gives advice and guidance on how to do certain things. So I know that, I think I know that the NUS is part of the reason that we use Union Clouds, which is the service that the SU uses.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, to sell tickets and to advertise events. So that's a service, controversially, which we use, which might be for the better that comes from NUS, because it's good communication between us and them, and rather than having to work with private for-profit company aids in the working together to fix that and build it up into something better. We send delegates to the NUS off from the Students' Union to put forward what we're doing here at the SU and things that we want to see being brought up and being engaged in as a wider student debate with the Students' Union, with other student unions across the country. I think, like Matthew said, having those delegates there and really pushing them to put forward things that RSU is doing and saying, this is what our RSU is doing. We've found that it makes our students happier, it makes them feel more engaged, it really goes to show that they're happy with what we're doing, and we want to share this with you guys. It is a collective, as the other two candidates have said, and we can not only learn a lot from what the other students' unions are doing, but also teach them some of the things that we've learned here, campaigns and things we've done at Lancaster.
Thank you. We have had one question submitted from our online form, so hopefully I'll be able to ask this one. It's directed to you, Luke. But then if we've got time, we can hopefully get you guys to ask each other one or two questions about anything you have to add at the end of the debate. So, Luke, this has come from an anonymous question submitter. And one of the key public mistakes that you've made last year was in relation to the Grisdale X-Draft trailer. How would you ensure a mistake like this that caused offence to people across campus does not get repeated if you're in this role?
Yeah, so like I said, when you asked the questions about mistakes that were made in the things that we've done, that obviously was a massive error of judgment, and like you said, it upset a fair few people across campus. Going forward, how I would go about avoiding that in the future is it's communication. The reason that went ahead is because we were all there in an isolated bubble in that committee. We were like, oh yeah, seems like a good idea. But we really did not think to look outside that committee bubble and say, I wonder what other people think of this. And that led to obviously massive upset that was caused. It really is really important to get as many opinions as possible about what we're doing, make sure that it reaches people with the message that you want it to reach them with, make sure that message is positive, and also it engages as many people and really piques the interest of people. So communication is massive, not only with your team that's working with you, but also with the people it's going to reach. And you need to make sure that this can be received well and it's done tastefully.
Thank you. Now, in the last few minutes, do any of you have any questions for anybody else, whether it's an open question or a specific question directed at one person? No? Well, in that case, that is the end of the first debate for the full-time office position of VP, Union and Development. These guys have been your candidates. We have Martin, Matty and Luke, whose name I've finally gotten right. So, if you want to see more of these three, They will be at the hustings on Monday of week 8, which is next week, I believe, at 6 p.m. in Barker House Farm down in Cartmel, and they will be doing their full 2-minute husts, I believe, and then answering some questions after that. So head down to there on Monday of week 8 in Barker House Farm. And with that, we'll be wrapping up the first debate, but stay tuned. So in 5 or so minutes, we should hopefully be having the 3 candidates for the President's debate up next. Thank you very much.